we're in the very first inning, and things will start to get very, very interesting quite soon. And that's when the real big moves will be seen. Eric Sprott, I don't know anybody who studied the silver market better as an investor than Eric Sprott. He must be so frustrated because he put all this money in all these juniors, well, which starting to get a bit, but which haven't done anything good for him in years. And I wrote all of the stuff he'd been writing in the last few decades. And he said a few times when silver really starts to break out because of these fundamentals, because of the physical shortages, you'll see $100 silver within a week. I once said that Bitcoin is the best money ever invented, and I still mean that. Gold is wonderful, but the wonderful thing about Bitcoin is that you can store your assets, location. It doesn't matter which location you use, it's out there in the cloud. So to travel with your assets, it's much better to have digital hard money than to have physical hard money, because it's you have to carry that. But I think you need a mix, and there are many alternatives. In a way, real estate is an alternative as well. I always tell people, if you put money in real estate, you put money outside the system. You don't rely on a bank to store that money for you. It's there on that physical location, and not that much can happen to it. Well, can go down in value, and of course the government can confiscate it, or nationalize it. But this hasn't happened many times. So we spend a lot of time thinking about scenarios which could develop. And this is like, if you have a company, if you run a company, you need to ask yourself, what is happening when we have a server crash, when our computer server crashes? What's happening when this office burns down? You need to have certain procedures, and the same goes with your money and your net worth. So you have to prepare and hope you'll never need it.
Silver is rapidly gaining global attention as industrial demand surges and supply falters. In fact, by mid-2025, silver prices have jumped over 25 to 33% year-to-date, reaching highs not seen in a decade. It's not gold's twin anymore. It's a vital component in solar panels, EVs, AI, and electronics, pushing demand past supply for 7 straight years. Inventory levels are cratering, London vault stocks down drastically, suggesting a looming silver squeeze. Investors are watching closely, as a lasting gap between demand and supply could spark explosive price moves.
Give me 10 good names. Tom, give me 10 good silver names. It's hard to find 5 nowadays.
Exactly.
Even Wheaton Precious Metals used to be a silver streamer. It's 50% gold now. Companies as First Majestic are 50% gold nowadays. So it tells you we're running out of silver. There's no silver there for mines to invest. And the US have been playing these markets and manipulating the precious metals by selling all these futures through the COMEX. But that game of musical chairs is ending now. The price discovery has moved from west to east. You might remember seeing that graph on X, that the major price movements in the monetary metals are now in the Asian trading hours. They used to be during the Western trading hours. So I think the musical chair game is ending, and one day we'll have this huge news coming from the physical metal markets that something blows up and somebody can't deliver. And I think the rise of gold and silver, what we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, is just front running by insiders who know what's coming. And so
While uranium initially faced headwinds in 2025, geopolitical tensions and tariff unpredictability dragged spot prices lower, the long-term outlook remains robust. Projections from the IAEA and NEA suggest demand could rise 50 to 140% by mid-century. The uranium resource base is deemed sufficient to meet this growth through 2050, provided timely investments in exploration and production occur. However, achieving this will require navigating significant lead times, regulatory hurdles, and capital investment to avoid future supply bottlenecks.
we're in the very first inning, and things will start to get very, very interesting quite soon.
Mhm.
And that's when the real big moves will be seen. Eric Sprott, I don't know anybody who studied the silver market better as an investor than Eric Sprott.
Mhm.
He must be so frustrated because you put all this money in all these juniors, well, which starting to get a bit, but which haven't done anything good for him in years. And I wrote all the stuff he'd been writing in the last few decades. And he said a few times when silver really starts to break out because of these fundamentals, because of the physical shortages, you'll see $100 silver within a week.
History shows that rampant money printing erodes the value of currencies. Since 1971, the US dollar has lost roughly 99% of its purchasing power versus gold. As systemic crises loom, central banks are expected to respond with heavy stimulus, likely triggering inflation and currency crises. This deterioration in monetary stability often leads to sovereign stress, IMF interventions, and social upheaval. Past episodes of hyperinflation, such as post-World I Germany, illustrate the political chaos unleashed when economic foundations unravel. As trust in fiat currencies falters, hard assets like gold, silver, and Bitcoin become lifelines of stability.
We haven't seen one market yet where there was a real physical shortage on the metal. Maybe palladium in 2017, and then palladium prices tripled within a year.
What about the nickel situation?
There was a very short spike because of one trader who was wrong, and then just like the Hunt brothers, they changed the rules of the game. What I mean is that industrial clients like Samsung or Sony or Tesla say they can't keep producing because they can't find the metal.
Right.
And that's when we'll learn what the market reaction is on shortages like that. And in a way, the rare earth metals have shown a little example, but that's such a small market. That's a 5 billion a year market, or maybe 10 billion a year. But what happens when copper gets real scarce, or silver, or nickel, or uranium? Uranium, that's the space to watch. Kazatomprom just said production will be down 10% lower than previous estimates. There's so much new demand coming for uranium in the next few decades. And we're specialized in new discoveries. Maybe there's one new discovery, but it's not a big one yet. You have next gen, and then so I can't envision a scenario where we'll have enough commodities for all that's needed in the next few decades. And that's when we'll start to make real money.
Modern societies often feel unshakably stable until they suddenly aren't. A disaster, riot, or blackout can swiftly unravel public order. Examples like Hurricane Katrina, Paris riots, or a Dutch police force stretched thin illustrate how quickly normalcy can crack. In times of crisis, people retreat to essential safeguards. Whether it's financial reserves or trusted local networks, preparedness becomes paramount. Recognizing that breakdowns can happen fast, even in resilient systems, means we must plan stay resilient, safeguarding assets and communities before instability has a chance to take hold.
When people always ask me, how can you be so sure that the gold price will keep rising? Well, because I know the money printing will keep on going. As long as M2 is growing, I know the gold price is just a proxy of the money growth. It's just going in tandem. Sometimes it's with shocks. But if you look at the long-term graph, it just follows the amount of money in the system. And I'm afraid...
To your earlier point, you know, the US dollar versus gold since 1971 has devalued by 99%, right?
Yeah, that was the point I made earlier. And I'm afraid that in the next crisis, central banks will start to really flood the system, because that's all they can do. And that's when we get the real currency crisis, which I spoke of before. So you get a sovereign crisis because countries might not be able to finance themselves anymore. So then they need to run to the IMF. The IMF still hasn't used their balance sheet, so they can print trillions of SDRs. And central banks will need to print trillions and trillions of new money to handle these new crises, economic crises. Why? Because if they don't print the money, you'll have social crisis, and you'll have political crisis. For people who are interested in these phases where the money system becomes unstable, I read the book When Money Dies a few times. It's on the Weimar hyperinflation. This crisis became so severe in 1922 in Germany after the First World War. They couldn't find any politicians willing to be in the next government, because as a politician you're responsible for the mess. I see, if you look at the quality of governments in the US, in the West, here in the Netherlands, we have a huge political crisis nowadays as we speak. The real smart people don't go into politics anymore, you know. It's just the narcissist and the psychopath sometimes who love the attention but so you can have a huge crisis on a political level, on a social level. You can have riots on the street. Look at the social imbalance in Europe with all the immigration. People are starting to get really stressed, especially when you enter an economic crisis. So this explains why many of the rich people, you see the same in Canada, in the UK, in Europe, rich people are leaving for Singapore and Dubai. And the West, at the start of this talk, you said that is very uncertain what will happen next. One thing is certain: the West is in decline, and the East and the Middle East is on the rise, I think.
We're witnessing a shift in global gravity. Political and economic influence is moving from the West toward Asia, the Middle East, and emerging markets. Wealthy individuals and firms are increasingly relocating to places like Singapore and Dubai, drawn by stability and opportunity. As Western institutions face political turmoil and social fragmentation, investors seek alternatives. Countries in the East are investing heavily in infrastructure, technology, and financial ecosystems that project long-term growth. The dynamic is clear. While traditional powers drift, new centers of gravity are rising, bringing fresh investment corridors and strategic realignment.
So, it's always difficult for people to understand things will get unstable as long as something is stable, because it's so hard to imagine things are not stable. But we all know, and we all know these great examples, you know, the Hurricane Katrina, when it arrived in New Orleans, even the police were seen plundering shops within 24 hours. Society can break down in 1 or 2 days when you have the right. I once saw a documentary I like to watch real crime on TV, one of my bad habits. And then there was this police officer somewhere in rural in Manchester or whatever in the UK. And he said, people should understand we are the last line of defense. When we can't handle it anymore, it's chaos. And I've been a journalist and a police reporter myself in my younger years. And I knew in a big city like Amsterdam, on an average night, there were 20 police officers on the street for the whole city. So we always think it's very stable and we can handle everything. But as soon as you have a huge riot, Paris is a great example. We had this gang war somewhere in the south of France where gangs took the street and police had to run. So I'm not predicting this will happen, but things can go from stable to unstable very quickly.